We would also like to thank the Lambs Club for their support in presenting this event with the National Arts Club. The Lambs is America's oldest professional theatrical organization, founded in 1874.
Wow.
If you want to find out more about the Lambs, visit thelambsclub.org. And it's an active club. It's not just the restaurant, which is something entirely different. Joining us tonight is Foster Hirsch, our moderator, Ken Waisman, the original producer. Co-editor of the book. And our special guests, the original Broadway performers, Eileen Kristen, Ray Lawrence, Carol Levis, and Kate Cameron. And they will be performing after the panel discussion. They'll be performing songs from the original show. Unfortunately, we have a few books for sale, but the books didn't come in. But you'll have the opportunity to order the books and to get the cast to sign the book plates that you put in the book. So I apologize for that. Just to introduce these folks, Foster Hirsch is a film historian and professor at Brooklyn College and author of many books on film and theater. Ken Waisman is a Tony Award-winning producer, one of only 2 producers in the history of Broadway to have a musical run over 3,000 performances and a play run over 1,000 performances. He's most known for developing and producing the original Broadway production of Grease, as well as 2 of Broadway's longest-running plays, Agnes of God by John
Pillmeyer,
of course, and Torch Song Trilogy by Harvey Fierstein. Eileen Kirsten originated the role of cheerleader Patty
Dombrowski
in Grease and portrayed the infamous Leona Helmsley, the Queen of England. Eileen is also well known for her television work, including Lion's Hope and for which she received 2 Emmy nominations for Best Supporting Actress. A member of the Ensemble Studio Theater since 1984, Eileen has acted extensively off-Broadway and has performed all over town with her own band. Ray Mattis has enjoyed a busy and varied career in show business for over 15 years. He has performed and directed in regional and stock theaters throughout the United States, appeared in off-Broadway productions, and made his Broadway debut in the original Grease. He went on to direct 2 national tours of the hit musical featuring performers Frankie Avalon, Bowser from Sha Na Na, if you remember that, and Cheryl, who's still performing right now. He's most proud of his work as founding artistic director of the first theater workshop for the disabled, the NTWH, for which he received the Timmy Award. Carol Levis starred as the original Sandy in Broadway's Grease, where she and Eileen were still friends ever since shared a dressing room. She was widely known as Carol, starring with Paula Janis in the iconic children's TV show Carol and Paula in the Magic Room. Carol sang for the New York and Champlain Shakespeare festivals and guest starred in numerous TV shows. Her off-Broadway roles include 2 years as Louisa in The Fantastics. Jim Canning originated the role of Doody in the Broadway cast of Grease in February of 1972. He played the role a year previously in the original Chicago production, which actually took place in a basement on weekends and was staged with cardboard sets and it converted, actually trolley barn on the north side of Chicago. Jim stayed with the musical through 1974 and then went on to lead many acting to land many acting jobs in Hollywood all through the 70s and 80s. So So please welcome the panel and performers and enjoy what's going to be a really entertaining evening.
He was going to sit there.
Oh, they're sitting here.
Did you want to sit next to? Did you want to sit next to Ken?
Where's the stage manager?
Here, actually, I think it'd be best.
Okay, Ken.
Ken, could you sit here? Sure.
Oh, but I'm supposed to sit next to, oh, this side. We reversed it, I see.
Okay. I could tell from the way you applauded the title of the book, Grease, Tell Me More, that we've got an audience of aficionados here. They know what Tell Me More means. Unfortunately, as announced, the books didn't arrive, but I'm here to tell you that it is a superb book. It really is terrific.
Oh, thank you.
But I mean, it's one of a kind. It's incredibly moving. It's about the passage of time. It's about Broadway, but it's about so many other things. But you can order a copy, and all of these wonderful people can sign it for you.
Charles over there will take your orders, and we'll sign the plates that will go on the book.
Oh, so you get all these. So we're going to talk for about a half hour, 40 minutes, and then our performers are going to sing songs from Greece. So that will be terrific.
Great.
Now Ken, you're sort of the origin here. When the material was presented to you, what was it that drew you? What made you think this could work, or did you know it was going to work at this level?
Oh, well, let's start at the beginning. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. My college roommate, Phil Markin, had become a dentist, and he was taking an orthodontic course in Chicago in the summer of 1971. Now, Phil was a total pessimist all through college, and even after college, because we stayed friends. He never had a good word to say about anything. It got to the point where he couldn't say a good word about anything. He'd ruin his reputation. So when he called me on the phone and said, my wife and I, we went to this basement community theater located in the basement of a trolley barn. We sat on the floor because there were no seats. They gave us paper to sit on. And we watched a brown painted scenery with drip marks in a show called A Play with some music that sounded just like the kind of music that played at our high school in Baltimore, at Forest Park, that we were playing on the radio and records, the 1950s. He said, I think you should come and see it. So I was a little shocked that Phil would, and but because, the first time I'd heard him be positive about something, I got on a plane and I flew out to Chicago, and they picked me up at the airport, and we went to the Kingston Mines Theater. It was definitely in the basement of an old trolley barn. And yes, they gave us newspapers when we walked in. We sat on the floor. And yes, I could see the drip marks. And I remember thinking to myself, I put on shows in my basement when I was a kid on brown painted scenery. We had no drip marks. Anyway, when the show began, what I saw was my yearbook coming to life. But I also knew that everybody else in the audience was seeing their yearbook come to life. I knew every one of the characters that they were portraying, on stage. And afterwards, I met with Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey, who had written the book Music and Lyrics. And I said, I can see that you guys have the talent to write a full musical. Because just from what I saw, the plot, there was no Danny and Sandy as central characters. They were in there as part of the ensemble. But you could go out and get a hamburger. You could come back, and you wouldn't have missed anything, really.
How many of the songs were there?
Well, let's see. We Go Together was there. Beauty School Dropout was there. Magic Changes was a little thing on the radio that they used in the background of one of the scenes, but we brought it out to be a full production number in New York. And a few of the others. There were some songs that were absolutely atrocious, like a Monster Mash. I said, we need a show-stopping dance at the high school, not a Monster Mash that goes like this. So Jim and Warren were very agreeable. They said, okay, I said, what about the hand jive? Because I remembered the hand jive from when I was in school. And they had forgotten about it. Jim and Warren were the encyclopedias of the 50s. Now, you have to remember, in the 1960s, everything had changed so much that the 1950s could have been part of the Civil War. I mean, it just felt like forever away. So this was all like, oh my God, we're thinking of this again, you know. And so the next morning, Jim Jacobs called me on the phone and he sang Born to Hand Jive. He had written it overnight. And that became our show-stopping, you know, number for the high school dance. But anyway, I said, if you guys move to New York, I will work with you on helping you to develop this as a full musical. And I'll produce it. My partner then, Maxine Fox, and I will produce it. And she came out the next day to see what was the final performance in Chicago. And they did move to New York. We did start working on it. They wrote Summer Nights and other songs. They made Danny and Sandy the main characters. Structurally wise, it's really Sandy's show because she's the one that makes the big change in order to get the guy, you know. And the rest is history. But after the opening night and when we became a hit, Jim Jacobs said to me, he said, you know, when we told everybody, it's the wrong kind of music for this. Jim Jacobs said to me after we opened and we were a hit, he said, you know, when we told everybody in Chicago that we were going to move to New York and you were going to work with us on making it a full musical and you would produce it, they all said, do not go. Those New York people are going to louse up your play.
That obviously didn't happen. But we have a performer here. Jim was in the original Chicago production, am I right? The original.
Yep.
So Jim is original. What memories do you have of that show?
It was very interesting because I was just a kid in Chicago and I was not particularly inclined to be an actor, but one night I was walking home. I was a substitute teacher in the Chicago public schools, and I was walking home and there was a utility pole and it had a little a flyer and it says rehearsals for tryouts for a rock musical from the 50s, and I thought, well, I'll try that, and I went to the auditions, and I got this part of Duty, and it was a wonderful experience, and it sort of got me into the whole acting business, and a year later, Jim Jacobs, one of the writers, called me from New York and said, Andy, they're casting the show in New York. They can't find a duty that they like. Why don't you fly out and sing a song and get the part? And I did. I flew out, I sang the song, I got the part, and I was
Were you the only one from Chicago who came to New York?
There was another actress in that original production. Her name was Mary Lou Henner. She was a 17-year-old a girl who was just brassy and old, and she was perfect for the part of Marty. She didn't come to New York until a little bit later. She was in the first national tour of the show with Ray DeMatteis.
Yeah, and what happened was, because we know this well, she was so in credit in not coming originally that she got on a plane and she came and she was going to, this was going to be, and she could stay a week and do the auditions and all this other stuff. So she was ready. When it was time for us to go into rehearsal, she was ready.
Yeah, well, how it happened was, during the first national tour, we cannot find a Marty. And then we're sitting there at the rehearsal studio, we've been auditioning people, and Jim said, well, there was a girl that played the first few weekends in Chicago. She played Marty. And she didn't come in when the others came in to audition. But she was really good. I said, well, where is she? He said, well, he said, I'll call her. She's coming in tomorrow, he said. Mary Lou Henner flew in, came to the audition. We had her go through, what you do in auditions and so forth and so on. And then we said, we're going into rehearsal this coming Monday. And she said, okay, I'll be there. She went home. She not only packed everything up, she got a roommate for her roommate so she didn't leave her hanging. She convinced, at the university where she was in Chicago, she convinced them to give her credit for that last part of the senior year because she'd gone a working assignment. This is how persuasive she was. And she showed up at rehearsal and she's been Mary Lou Henner ever since.
But Jim, when you were doing it in Chicago, was the local response excited? Did you feel something was happening?
It started out as a weekend musical, Friday and Saturday night. And it started, word of mouth was immense. After like the third weekend, we didn't get paid or anything. The rehearsals were in the evening because everyone had daytime jobs. And but the word of mouth on the show was phenomenal. It was sort of a very heady atmosphere of theater in the north side of Chicago in 1970. And by the third weekend, it was sold out. There were people waiting to get tickets to sit on the floor on newspapers and hear these songs because it had that sort of, this is what my high school was like, feel to it. And that's what I think made it a big hit in Chicago.
Now, the two women here are original Broadway performers. Eileen played Patty Simcox, who is sort of, would you say she's how would you describe Patty?
I actually think of her as the villain of the piece. Although from her viewpoint, of course, she's the heroine of the piece. But from everybody else's viewpoint, she's definitely the villain. She annoys just about everybody.
But that's courageous to play a character who's going to annoy everybody.
It was scary, actually. I had wanted to play Marty. I kept on trying to get my agent to kind of switch it around and let me audition, but he said, no, they're really thinking of you, for Patty.
Carol, you created Sandy, one of the great characters in Broadway musicals, really. And what was your reaction to her when you read the script? Did you think this part is for me?
I did, because I lived it. I was the oldest person in the cast except for Miss Lynch, I think. And I graduated from high school in 1957. Wow. So I was there. And the arch, around the stage had high school yearbook photos. I brought my high school yearbook to Jim and Lauren because they wanted to see it. And they were sitting out there in the audience freaking over the pictures. Oh, look at his hair! Look at his eyebrows! Oh, look at this guy! And they were loving it. So they said, is it okay if we use some of these? And I figured, I can't imagine anybody's going to mind. And that's exactly what they did. So some of the pictures that were around the proscenium were from my yearbook. And it just so happened that I had been mad for a boy in high school who became my friend, and when I walked my dog at night, we would sit across the street from Brooklyn College, which was right across from my high school, Midwood High School. Eileen and I, it turns out, both grew up just about a block away from each other. We lived East Flatbush.
But we never knew each other. She said she was this little blonde girl whose father said she'd ride her bike on our block, but I never saw
I
her.
rode all over the place.
So in any case, we got to be friends, this boy and I was just so lovesick I could hardly stand it. And I thought he's gonna ask me the prom, he's gonna ask me. He didn't. He didn't. Nobody did. Oh, it was right. I sat out prom night, and then somebody wrote me a song about it about 12 years later. So I knew how she felt.
Were you Sandra Dee in your real life? Because your character is Sandra Dee before she changes.
Well, yes, I was. I wasn't fully grown up. I really wasn't. I grew 2 inches in college. It was just everything took me a lot of time. And my mother always said, your day will come. It took about 50 years, but and yes, I knew who she was. I really did. And I knew how it felt not to be at the prom. And I was mad for the greasers in my high school. Oh my God, they were so beautiful to me. They were theatrical. They had those chains hanging from their pants. They wore boots and they clapped along in the hall, shaking, this walk and the hair. Oh my God, I just wanted to get my hands in it. It was the DA in the back. I would sit in the back of the classroom and I could see all those DAs lined up in front of me. I recently did something at a high school, which I do when they're doing shows, and I said DAs, and they were looking at me like, what the heck is that? And I said, it's short for duck ass. Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes.
I knew her heartache, and I couldn't believe I was on the stage playing the very same thing that I thought I'd never lived through. So maybe it did me some good.
The challenge about Grease is it's sort of a satire of the 50s, but you have to have you have to have a feeling for it.
Well,
So
the main
you-
thing-
it's a very delicate balance.
No, the
because
main
you could
thing-
go over the line and just make fun of it, but you do it with affection.
No. Here's, is this off? No. Okay, no, here's the thing. The first thing that I noticed that Jim and Warren did absolutely right in that community theater production was that you totally believed that the cast was real, that they did not change out of their outfits, their costumes. They kept those clothes on, they got into an old jalopy, and they went out for hamburgers. And I said to Jim and Warren that night, I said, the one thing that we have to keep here, that will keep it from being like a Silly Dames at Sea or something, which worked in its own right,
Yeah.
but wouldn't work for here, is to make sure that we think these are real kids from our yearbook. So the choice of director, the choice of choreographer, the designer, everything has to be based on making these kids real. And that's what
But
made it work.
stylized for a musical.
Well, of course it's not,
Stylized.
of course you can't have real life up
No.
there. You have to theatricalize it.
But with great
still, the
affection.
attitude-
That's why
Yes.
we're here tonight.
Yeah.
Because there's such affection for the characters.
Right.
We all love the characters. And you feel a sense of community.
Well,
but
yeah,
that
because
comes from a production
because we
that's
kept
rightly
their
balanced.
we kept their vulnerability, which made them likable, no matter what was going on, and we made it a situation which we didn't realize at the time, where young kids, would react to the show and then later to the movie, but they're watching with great affection their older brothers and sisters. So all of that went into the magic.
And did you assume your audience knew the music that
Well, everybody.
songs are based on?
Well, what we realized or thought was it would bring back some nostalgia, because nobody thought, we couldn't even go out and find records with 50s music on it at first. We found a little shop in the village, which was a collector shop, and they had some albums from the 50s. Nobody was listening to that music in 1971 and 72. So it was sort of like bringing it back. And although the songs
It's
were
only 10 years after the 50s
but
were over.
when you look what happened in the 60s, it could have been 50 years before.
It was over.
Yeah, and and so although these songs were all original, they took you back to that period.
Very authentically so. Now,
Yeah.
all of you were long-run performers. Ray, you joined the show after it had been playing for a while. Is
Yes,
that correct?
I was cast in the first National.
First
with
National.
Mary Lou Henner and John Travolta and Jerry Sachs, God bless him,
Did you play one part or a series of parts?
No, I played one. I was the mooning champ of Rydell.
And that was your part for throughout the
Yes,
what?
would you like to see my camera? I was very blessed.
When you play a long run,
Yes.
how do you, each of you, please answer, how do you keep it fresh? Because you were in it for years, weren't you?
Yes, I've done 900 performances of it.
900 performances,
Yeah,
national
I did-
tour?
Yes, I did national, and I was on Broadway. And again, it was the kind of thing, you're talking to this little ex-fat Italian kid from New Haven, and then, and the next thing I know, I'm on Broadway in an enormous hit. And of course now we're being invited to the Actors Fund benefit performance of A Chorus Line. And we're being invited to sing, I've been talking about this before, singing behind Ethel Merman, singing There's No Business Like Show Business. Coming at me, I'm a part of this whole thing, and all of a sudden, we're going to Studio 54, and they're hosting Broadway night, and are you kidding? I was going to enjoy that as long as I could, I didn't have to go,
But did it get monotonous, or did you enjoy the material so much and each other so much and the audiences so much that it kept fresh?
I think that one of the secrets about the show was it has an incredible amount of kid energy. In
Yes.
it. I mean, we were not, 18-year-olds, but we knew how. We all felt that sort of energy that the audience felt. And a lot of things. Sometimes you forget a line, or nothing phased. Nothing came between the audience's feel that these kids were just having fun up there, and that helped us through long winters.
And you bonded together. You were friends, and you're friends still.
Yes, we are.
You are friends.
We used to go out to Charlie's usually after the show, or Joe Allen's or Jimmy Ray's, and we traveled as a gang, pretty much.
We had our own table at Charlie's. They reserved a table just for us.
And we would close the joint down. First of all, we had to calculate how much everybody owed. I was with the show for 2.5 years. And what kept it fresh for me was just a low level of stage fright, which I always had before the show. Once I get on stage, I'd be fine. But particularly every night before the dance, because I got thrown up in the air, thrown under, and the timing had to be just right, so it was always like, is this going to happen? Is Barry Bostwick going to come in a little late and drop me on the floor? Which happened a couple of times.
But you never changed parts. You were Patty,
No, I was
always Patty. Did you lobby for a change of role?
Well, no, well, they asked me to come back after I had left and I was doing Ryan's Hope, where I really was playing, you know, very mischievous bad girl. So they asked me to come back. I said, I come back as Marty. And it was like, what? No, you're not doing Marty, you are Patty. You are Patty.
Carol, how long were you with the show?
Not as long as everyone else here. I was there the first year, and then I went out to California and started working in television there. You know, I managed to get, you know, those wonderful guest star roles and all those nighttime things that were running then. Kojak and Mannix and Barnaby Jones and those. But I did have the experience in the long run, because from 1966 to 68, I played Louisa at the Sullivan Street Playhouse in the Fantastic. That is like playing to you. That's how, in fact, even closer. And so when you're doing that, and keeping that fresh for all of those many nights, and I did go back and cover it now and then when they asked me to come in. I found, first of all, I loved the music in it, and I loved singing it, and I was so grateful that I'd been born with a voice to sing it with. And there were wonderful people in the cast. I was the only girl, so I had my little corner with a little screen, and all the rest, you know, was guys. And I think that was a real lesson for me. I actually, you know, had to think about things to think about to get to those places that were really heartbreaking for her. After a while, one of them would wear out. I had finally overcome that horror. Now what? And if one of my cats died, that was very sad for me, but at least I could use it.
But when you did Sandy, did you want to leave, or was it time to leave?
It was a complicated situation, which is probably not a story for tonight.
Did you come back to the show?
No, I never.
You never did.
But the other thing that went on for me during that year, I went up to WPIX at their request. They wanted me to be the host of a new children's show. They were thinking about a cartoon show. And the way things evolved, I just decided the cartoons weren't really going to help kids all that much, although they were fun. So I dragged my dearest friend, Paula Janis, into the situation. And we had both been teachers, we were licensed teachers in the New York public school system. We knew each other from high school, and they asked us to do an audition, and we did one for 15 minutes, and they came back to us and said, nobody had your chemistry, and we're going to go with your ideas and what you're thinking about, and the Magic Garden was born.
Oh, wow.
Now, we
It
did,
ran for 12 and a half years, and now it's 50 years later, saying, because I only shot it on Mondays, because we had Mondays off from Greece. So that was one of those years you have when you're an actor, and you're starving, and you think you'll never work again. And then you get a year like that, and you think you'll never sleep again.
we did get everybody back when we became the longest running show in Broadway history in 1979. So the original cast played the first act, or was it reverse? Second act.
Second act.
And the first national tour played the first act.
Yeah.
And it was quite a big event with an all-night it was then called the, what was the hotel called in those days?
It was the American.
The Americana. They changed it, yeah. In 2 ballrooms, and everybody left at dawn wearing these little, I went the distance with grease buttons. But we had Carol, everybody was back when we did that.
And now the book really is in celebration of the 50th anniversary, is it
Yes,
not?
which was last summer. Actually, it was February a year ago, so now it's the 51st anniversary. But in the book, you know, everybody contributed. Their backstage stories. John Travolta tells about his first audition and how different experiences. Ray, and there's a funny story in there about John Travolta telling Ray and Jerry Zaks on the first day of rehearsal.
Someday he's going to play Zuko.
Right.
You know what? Yeah, right.
So there's all kinds of great stories in it, because everybody contributed their own experiences.
And you invited everybody, because there are about 200 voices in the book.
Oh yeah, everybody was invited.
So it's a collage. It's a wonderful effect. So you hear one voice and then a counter voice.
And we had
it's a
so many,
musical performance.
of the people that were in Grease went on to become very well-known stars, like Mary Lou Henner and John Travolta. Richard Gere, who got his first movie because we had him star as Denny Zuko in our first London production. He started as an understudy in New York, and just so on and so on and so on. You'll see the stories.
Now that we're talking with the cast here, could you tell us about the contributions of your director, Tom Moore, and your choreographer, Pat Birch?
Sure.
A crucial contribution.
Yeah.
But why did you choose those two people?
Well, as I said, we wanted to keep that reality. We wanted people to think that these were not actors up there. And I was thinking about, we talked about different directors and the author's agent at ICM, she had somebody in mind, which I didn't think was going to work at all. So we went through that whole little bit, as you have to go through. And then I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute, 3 years ago, I was invited to an off-Broadway, one of those weekend things they do for 2 or 3 weekends, a showcase, called Welcome to Andromeda. It was a play about a quadriplegic who couldn't move and his nurse. There were only 2 characters. And I thought it was so real, I kept having to pinch myself to remind myself that they were actors. He wasn't really a quadriplegic, she wasn't really a nurse, but I kept having to pinch myself. And the amount of humor, because it's a very, unpleasant subject, but the amount of humor that the director got out of it, and the sight gags, and the whole thing, I thought about him, Tom Moore. Now, when I saw that play, I said to the agent of the play afterwards, I said, who directed this? Because he did a remarkable job. I fully believe these were real people. And she said, Tom Moore, he's assistant at the Mark Taper Forum in LA. I said, well, I'm going out to LA. And so she set up a meeting. We talked for like 2-3 hours at lunch. And I left thinking someday I'm going to work with this guy, Tom Moore. And of course, now 3 years later, I did 2 shows, other directors fit for those shows. I'm now thinking about Grease, a director that's going to make it real, and I thought about Tom Moore. He turned us down because we flew him to New York. He read the script. He said, I hated those greasers when I was... He said, I hated those people, those bullies, those greasers. I didn't want anything to do with them. I'm not right for this. I said, Tom, you will, and he said, they're so unlikable. I said, Tom, you will make them likable. As a director and in casting, you will make them likable. I said, now on the plane, when you go back home now, because he had to get back to the Mark Taper Forum, I said, you read it again. And he gets off the plane, runs to a payphone, because that's where we did it then, calls me and says, I hope I didn't talk you out of hiring me. I said, no, you didn't. Pat Birch, I thought of while I was in Chicago watching that Basement production, because I kept thinking, who can make, first of all, this is not the kind of musical that you do a big chorus of dancers with. Not with the intimacy and the reality that we're trying to create here. And so I thought, wait a minute, Pat Birch, because in the Me Nobody Knows, which was an off-Broadway hit, those kids, they were actors, those were performers, those kids, but you would have bet your life that they came from the ghetto. They were untrained, and she made them dance. Pat was always able to make actors look like they were trained dancers. So I thought, that's perfect. So when I came back, I ran right to Pat Birch's house. I played this moth-eaten tape with some of the songs on it and everything. She was with her husband, Bill Becker, who founded Janus Films. And she's looking at me like I'm nuts, this tape. And she's also, Ken, how can you hire a choreographer first? Don't you hire the director first? I said, suppose the director that you find doesn't want to work with me. I said, Pat, any director that wouldn't want to work with you on this project is the wrong director.
Good answer.
So at the end of this tape, she's looking at me, and her husband says, Bill says, Pat, this could be a hit. And then we started talking. Tom, when he came in, first thing I did was have him meet her. She was impatient because he was late. Tom later told me that he figured he better take a cab. He never would take a cab normally in those days, but he better take a cab because he didn't want to be late. And the cab got stuck in traffic, and he was very late. She was supposed to be going to a meeting with John Houseman up at the Lincoln Center. So she's on pins and needles. She's saying, we're there. She's saying, I can't wait anymore. I can't wait. He arrives. They sit down on the couch. They talk for 2 minutes, and then bang, it's a whole relationship. They're just talking. Forget John Houseman. Forget everything. And then we took John to Joe Allen's restaurant, Tom to Joe Allen's restaurant, to meet Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey. Now, Jim is very outgoing. He's an outgoing guy. Warren, who's no longer with us, but Warren was very reserved, and he would stare at you with these eyes, So you always thought, what did I do? What's he suspicious of? That was Warren. So the whole time we're sitting there at the table, Jim is outgoing, and he's talking with Tom Moore, and Warren is sick, So now we drive Tom to the airport. Tom says he's not right for this. He loves Pat Birch. One day he would love to work with her, but he hated, as I told you, he hated the greaser, blah, blah, blah. So I said, read it again on the plane. Now I come back, Jim calls and says, Warren doesn't like Tom. I said, oh. I said, why? He said, well, Tom didn't really look at him. I said, of course not, because Jim, you're the outgoing one. Everybody looks at you, and Warren sits there like this. So I said, Tom, you have to come back to New York. So he flies all the way back. We have another lunch, and I said, Tom, pay attention to Warren. Just keep talking to Warren, So he did, and afterwards Warren said, okay, I think I like Tom. And we had our director and had our choreographer.
When Grease opened on Broadway, and you moved quickly from the Eden to Broadway, the reviews were not great because I checked up on them. They were not great at all. How long was it before you really knew that you were in a hit and that you were going to be employed for a long time? Eileen?
Well, after, our first preview on Broadway, the ladies with the shopping bags came. And right during Magic Changes, the fire curtain started coming down. And they started applauding, which was so bizarre. So that first preview was really, really strange. I thought almost immediately we were in a hit. See, the beauty of a great producer is not only just to open up a show or to have the insight to say, I'm going to produce this show, but to figure out how to keep it open. And you had a lot of ideas. You were very, very creative with what you felt you had to do, especially after the reviews.
Thank you.
You would never know reading the reviews that you were going to be one of the long-run hits.
Can I just say one thing? My father saw the show, the second preview, and thought it was one of the worst things he'd ever seen. And I had been in Henry Sweet Henry, which looked like it was coming in as a big hit, and it didn't, and we flopped. And my father said that if Henry Sweet Henry couldn't make it, Grease had no chance. Of course, he never told me this. He told my mother.
Well, the thing is, that first preview was such a disaster. Anything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. But we had 3 weeks of previews. 3 weeks of previews to fix this show. And so every night we all got together, the whole creative team, and we would talk about what the audience did react to, what they didn't react to, how to fix this. One of the big things was Worst Things I Can Do. Worst Things I Can Do every night during those previews was getting no applause. People go, and then to get them back after was a real problem. So the song was not working, and it was slowing down the whole show. And Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey came over to me one night, and they said, Ken, if you want to cut that song, we're not going to argue. It's lousing up the show. I said, I know, but I don't want to cut it. Because first of all, it's the bookend to Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee. Secondly, it's the double standard of the period. But as another few performances went on, we realized we can't keep going like this. Fate was on our side. One night, Sylvia Hersher, who was head of E.H. Morris Publishing, and they had just bought the rights to our score. She comes into the back of the theater, and I'm telling her, I said, wait till we get to that song, you're going to die. I mean, we fix so many things, but this is a real problem. So we're watching it, and sure enough, you know, the audience, a little applause, nothing. She says to me, Ken, it's not the song. It's the scene leading into the song. Because when word gets around, in the movie, you find out that she's pregnant because at the drive-in movie it gets around. In the show on Broadway, it was in Jan's basement, a big party they're having. And when word gets around the basement that Rizzo is pregnant, nobody gives a damn. So she says, Ken, why would we give a damn when she sings a song? So at that night's meeting with everybody, you know, I brought that up, and Tom Moore, the director, went over and talked to the authors. They went home, they wrote a whole new scene, they brought it in, we put it in the next day, and in this scene, Sonny runs over and says, Rizzo, you need any money? You need any help? Other people run over. She's being defensive, but now we can see why. And when she sang the song that night, huge applause, and huge applause ever since. So that's what you do when you're working on a show. The reviews, yes, they were disappointing.
They're not hit reviews.
No, except for Walter Kerr, but that wasn't until like Sunday a week later. And our press agent, Betty Lee Hunt, had said to me, look, I'm telling Walter Kerr that he has to bring his teenage son. I want him to see the show through the eyes of his teenage son. And he gives us a good review. But no, we got some terrible reviews. We also got a great review in the Daily News. It said, the dancingest show in town. And I'll never forget one time I'm going to the box office for some reason. There's a line of people standing there at the box office waiting to buy tickets. And this little kid is talking to his mother. They say it's the dancingest show in town. So what happened was...
Jim, when did you realize you were in a hit?
Well, it was sort of interesting because I was not an equity actor. I was sort of a newbie from the Midwest, just stumbling around with salad behind my ears, and the rest of the actors had been, you know, in New York, and they sort of a lot of them had not been in any hits. I don't know if anyone in that original company was in like a big hit show. They all had been in either small shows or flops. And Walter Bobby, as a matter of fact, was in 3 flops before Grease. And during your previews, it was very tough because we all thought, Jim Borelli would say, this is a turkey. It's going to fold in a night. And Walter Bobby said, I've been in 3 flops. I can't be in another flop. We would get together outside, Jim Borelli, who played Sonny, get together outside his dressing room door, and we'd all harmonize and sing, Get a Job, which was from the Silhouettes. So I realized, I had no idea of theater or musical comedy, but I realized that the audience was going, after like 3 or 4 weeks, the audience was going nuts. They were standing up, they were cheering as soon as the harmony comes in on Freddie My Love, they were like, "Roar!" They loved it. So after about 3 weeks, I think.
You listen to the audience, not the critics,
I
in a
listened
way.
to the audience.
Yeah.
Well, the word of mouth is always what makes a show a hit or not, in the end. But we could see what was happening was that the pilot light in the box office was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So each week the gross was going up until finally, let's see, we had 3 weeks of previews, and then the 3rd week after we opened, that's 6 weeks into the run, we broke even. And then we just kept going from there. It was the Broadway-size show. Right from the beginning, we conceived it that way. The Eden Theater, although it was downtown, was a Broadway house. And that's where Man of La Mancha had opened, and Once Upon a Mattress had opened there.
And Old Calcutta.
And Old Calcutta later, after us.
And
That was
it was
after us.
originally the Yiddish Art Theater.
Yes, yes. Well, before that, it was the burlesque thing that ran there for years. What's it?
Choreo.
And Choreo's burlesque. That when I was at NYU as a student, that's what was playing there. And I went to see it with some students, never knowing one day I'd have a show in that theater. But anyway, so we were a Broadway show, and we were paying the union, the musicians' Broadway union. We were paying Broadway equity to the actors. So for moving uptown was just going to be a transfer. And I wasn't sure at first. Betty Lee Hunt, my press agent, took a yellow pad out, and she said, the summer's coming, and all the tourists are going to be coming in, and they will have heard of the show, word's getting around, but they don't go downtown, really. And you're too big a show to survive a summer with a small theater. You're in a big theater, you need the business. So let's think about moving uptown. the prices would double, the break even would double. So I was a little nervous, and she said to me, well, let's do a yellow pad. So she did pros and cons. And by the time we finished, a half hour later, I said, let's move uptown. And we moved to, now, the only theater that was available for us to move into uptown was the Broadhurst. Fortunately, it was exactly the layout like the Eden, so nothing had to be changed, set. But that's where we moved, and then we moved to the Royale because the Broadhurst had been previously booked for the fall. So that
Carol, was there a difference in audience response between the Eden downtown and the Broadway house?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think they all, you know, we found ourselves as we went along. We formed relationships with each other that were real. We had, there's a magic about Greece, about playing in Greece. We all still love each other 51 years later. And that was the same, whether it was the Eden or the Broadhurst or the Royale.
And somehow the audience really felt that.
Yes, I think they really did. You know,
Right.
when you're working in a show, you make a family. You almost have to, because you know, your hours are so screwy, and you don't see your family, and you don't have a regular life, and you get close. And sometimes when you maintain a friendship or two. This magic show, we're still friends. It's 51 years later. Oh, we are, and so are, I can't tell you, countless others who were in the show. And so we're here today with you, sharing this love that we have for each other, and still,
But
I think a little stunned at the success of it.
Ray was in more productions than anybody else, I believe.
Yeah.
So you can speak to, you were on tour, you did the national tour.
You gotta remember, that no one had thought of the 1950s in rock and roll. Back then, in the 70s, so here we are going across the country introducing rock and roll and all of that. People went nuts. And again, you know, it was one of those things that, you know, the audience response was incredible. And of course, there were the guys who showed up in the 50s cars that they parked in front of the theater. And when we opened in Hollywood, it was insane. You know, I still have Annette Funicello's autograph. Okay? All right, I want you to know. And then Funicello and I were like this. And because all of these 50 stars came out because it was an opportunity for them, you know, and we met them night after night after night, and the audience would go crazy, and they'd come dressed in the outfits, and the show had a pre-show that was a fake radio thing with they were playing all these 50s hits. And sure enough, the people would get up and dance. And it was, honest to God, this is true. All of a sudden we do this big prom thing in the second act, right? And here comes people from the audience wanting to come up on stage and dance with us. And they had to stop them just because they were in the prom dresses with the thing. It was sensational.
How many Danny Zuko's did you play on?
Oh, wow. God. I think I
A
played
lot.
them all.
All of them?
Yeah. I have to tell you my favorite, if I may. I gotta tell you.
Sure.
Patrick Swayze. May rest in peace. I gotta tell you, there was this thing. One night I am doing the show, and all of a sudden I'm going out the stage door after the thing, and here's this dude standing in with the cowboy boots and the thing, and he's the dude, and he says, "You're Ray DeMatteis." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My name's Patrick Swayze, but my friends call me Buddy." And he said, "I used to be a dancer, but I can't dance anymore because I hurt my knees, and I'm going to be auditioning for Danny Zuko. And we have a friend, a priest, honestly, a priest from Texas was our mutual friend. And he said, you could help me. Would you coach me?" And I said, "Yeah." So of course I coached and everything, and they pass on him for the first audition because it sounds too Texan. This was Tom. Sounds too Texan. We can't do it. So I am like, are you kidding me? In the meantime, we become friends, and he gets cast in West Side Story as Riff, and he is tearing it up. The guy playing Tony might as well sit in the corner because he. Okay, I'm sitting next to the quintessential New Jersey housewife. We're sitting right here. She is so in love with him that it's insane. So when Riff gets in the second act, she yells, "I'm not here!" Honest to God, that's true. Honest to God. So I go back and they say, you gotta see, I'll work with him. Okay, and so they cast him, and of course his first show, I got a hematoma on my right knee because I'm jumping over grease lightning 4,000 times, and so I have to stand in the back and I'm watching this, and there's Tom and Ken and they're pacing back and forth, and he comes on and I am not making this up. As luck has it, the entire audience right is busloads of these housewives from New Jersey. These women went nuts over him. And of course, in the second act, he comes out and he's got to be in his like track outfit, right? And of course, he's bulging out of it. I mean, he is ripped. They went absolutely nuts. And so what happens was, Ken said, "Where did you find him?" And I said, "He found me." And Tom Moore said the magic words, "He's going to be a star, you know." And I had the great fortune of a couple of years later when I went out and did the Hollywood thing, I was cast in a movie that he starred in called Fatherhood. And we ripped it. I'm sorry. It means a lot. He was an extraordinary friend. We worked together, and it was, it's wonderful.
I think we have to, I think the music is playing us off.
We gotta go sing.
We have to go, they're going to sing for us now, but folks, I have to tell you, buy the book and get all these wonderful people to sign it for you.
Charles is
It's
right over
terrific.
there at the desk, so you can all
Yes.
afterwards stop by.
Yeah. So now our cast is going to sing songs from, I've been listening to songs from Grease, the album. Once the songs get in your mind, they do not leave. They are so catchy, right? You're wed to them forever. They're yours forever. So we get to enjoy some of them now.
We're going to start with this song called Magic Changes.
I think you need a mic stand. But before we start that, I just want to give a tremendous thank you to Michael Danziger. He came in at the last minute. He came in at the very last minute. We had somebody, Ian that we work with, and Ian had a bit of a medical problem. And Michael just stepped right in. And the amazing thing is that that book that you see in front, that's the original lead. Is that extraordinary? He came over to my house yesterday with that, and I went, boy, are we in good hands. So thank you so,
Yes, he
so.
was a
So Warren Casey, the co-author, wrote this song during a rehearsal at that trolley barn in Chicago. They needed a song for a certain scene, and he brought me over to the piano and he said, "All right, Jim, I just want to go through this song." And I said, "Well, this is only 4 chords." And he said, "Well, Jim, just about every song from the 50s was 4 chords." So that's how projects like this that last for a long time can start with very simple things, like just 4 chords. Like you get a C, an A minor, an F, and a G7, and you can pretty much get a song going just out of that. You have to start by saying C, 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 A, minor, F, 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 G, 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 G7. What's that playing on the radio? I start swaying to and fro. I have never heard that song before, but if I don't hear it anymore, it's still familiar to me, sends a thrill right through me, 'cause those chords remind me of the night that I first fell in love too. Those magic changes, my heart arranges a melody that's never the same, a melody just calling your name and begs you, please come back to me. Turn to me, go away again, don't make them play again. The music I want to hear is once again
to join in because you won't know what the hell I'm singing. This was Patty Simcox's song, and it came right after Summer Nights. Now, let me just say, the shtetl that I grew up in Brooklyn, I never met a cheerleader in my life. So, anyway, my sister is here visiting from California, and I this was one preview only. It was cut the very next day. I was not told by the stage manager before the note session that it was going to be cut. So I was a little surprised. And I remember my shoulders were shaking. And Carol was sitting behind me, and I could feel her love coming at me. And so you're a very privileged audience. And if you brought pom-poms, you know, you can shake whatever you got with me. I don't even know if I can get through this because it's a little bit tricky. When I pass him on the street, he goes, yeah. When I'm sitting in the movies and he takes a nearby seat, he goes, bleh. When I stick my pom-poms in his face at some athletic meet, he goes, bleh. And I know he really thinks I'm neat. Well, those noises he comes out with don't distress me, and I don't mind getting spitballs in my hair, 'cause I know he's only trying to impress me, and it's just his way of acting debonair. When I see him in the hall, he goes, ah. When I see him at the corner leaning up against the wall, he goes, every time he even hears my name or thinks of me at all, he goes, and I know he thinks that I'm a dog. Well, a boy like that is certainly the rarest, one who's scared to look directly in your eye. When I try to talk to him, he gets embarrassed, and he mumbles while he fumbles with his fly. Cha-cha-cha. Playground after class, he goes, when I'm practicing my somersaults and cartwheels on the grass, he goes, and my petticoats are upside down so he can see mine. He goes, nice, and I know he thinks that I'm the best. La 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 la.
I have to bring this up here. Well, yeah. Well, I already told you that I am the mooning champ of life. And I get to express this to the girl of my dreams. I spend my days just mooning, so sad and blue, so sad and blue. I spend my nights just mooning all over you, all over you. Well, I'm so full of love, as any fool can see, 'cause angels up above have hung on Mulan. Why must you go? Why must I go? I'm mooning so all alone. So all alone. There would be no mooning if you would call me. I'm on the lying by myself in bed. I try and give myself the red eye, mooning over you. I'll stand front door. There's our front door. Every day at school I watch ya. Always will until I gotcha. There's a moon out
Just imagine, this is 51 years. Well, you already know that Sandy didn't go to the prom. And, you know, when I was going to play her, and I looked at the script and I thought, she's a gimmick. Where's the stuff? And I realized that Danny didn't show her during the summer the guy who turned up in school in September, where she never would have cared for him. And he could have anyone he wanted, and he spent the whole summer with this girl that nobody knew about. So I thought, okay, who is she really? Who is she? She's sensual, she's smart, she stands her ground when he treats her like crud on the first day of school. And so I decided that she really had a lot more going on than she does on paper, which is why I went to our director and I said, you know, Tom, they want me to cut my hair. My hair was, you know, like this. And I'm still thinking, I'll never play all those little soprano roles I do. I won't be walking into an audition. And I said, please, let me put it in a ponytail like all the good girls did when I wore it. You know, I wore a ponytail in high school. And then, at the end, all around. So he said, we'll try it tonight. And the big reason why that happened was because Tom Jones, who wrote The Fantastics, came to see a preview. And he was very upset afterward, and I didn't know he was there, and I didn't know he did this. He went up to Tom and said, she walks on looking like a roller derby queen, and nobody knows who she is, and nobody cares. That, you know, we don't want to see that happen to Sandy. So things began to evolve, and that's sometimes how things happen in the theater. So we tried it that night, and Tom came up to me and said, oh, keep it in, this is it. So I want you to know that there was some stuff in that girl. And that's when these girls from Australia were in the news recently, when there was a production in Australia, having fits and picketing the theater because Sandy changed for him. I said, oh, no, she didn't. Sandy was having a tough time. But Sandy changed just to say to him, it's all a game. It's all a game, and I can do it too. So that was where I went with her. And I think the girls who played her since, in high school, real teenagers, imagine, or anything else, that's so much more fun. So here she is in her bedroom, and she's a wreck, and she's listening on the radio, to the radio in her room, bundled up in her bathrobe, and she's singing along with a popular song of the time, which Kathy Moss, our dear Kathy, sang coming out of the radio, and I sang it with her. I was deprived of a young girl's dream by the cruel force of nature from the blue. Instead of a night full of romance supreme, all I got was a runny nose and Asiatic flu. It's raining, I'm prom black, my hair is a mess, makeup case. Sandy, you must stop anew. Don't you know what you must do? Hold your head high, take a deep breath, and cry. Goodbye to Sandra
So this song is Roger and Duty get this song in the second act. Now it's always great for actors to have two songs in a Broadway show. And Ray had Mooning in the first act, I had Magic Changes, and then you get a song in the second act. But the director put the song in the middle of a scene change. So nobody knew what was going on, and most of the audience didn't even know that we were singing. So,
Thank you, and sit down.
yeah. Okay, so this is called
Rock and roll.
okay, Rock and Roll Party Queen. And Jim Jacobs had to write this song during the rehearsals in Broadway, during the previews, actually, I think. And he said he wrote it in about 25 minutes. So it's a classic rock and roll song. And you may
It
be,
sounds like it was written in 25 minutes.
you may be the first people that actually hear the whole song because there's no scene change going on.
Right.
Okay. La 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 la. Little girl, do you know who I mean? Pretty soon she'll be 17. They tell me her name's Betty G. A rock and roll party queen. Friday night and she's got a day, going places just to stay out late. Dropping dimes in the record machine. A rock and roll party queen. Pampa, 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 oh no, can I have a car tonight? Baby, baby, can I be the one to love you with all my might? Yay, 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 yay. She's a girl that all the kids know. They talk about her wherever she goes. I can write a fan magazine about my rock and roll party queen. Bomba, 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 you should see her shake it to the latest dance. Baby, baby, no, don't call it puppy love. Don't you want a true romance? Ay, 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 rockin' and a rollin' little party queen. We're gonna do the stroll, hey, party queen. You know I love you so, my party queen. You're my rockin' and a rollin' party queen.
You know, couldn't we, a lot of us originals, do this play as a memory piece? Yeah. Just be the age we are, like it's in our mind. And what the heck? That's an idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
This next song,
Isn't it? Idea.
this next song, unfortunately, is another song that you can't join along with, unfortunately. But I wrote it for our 50th anniversary. And we did a show at Sardi's, and I cannot tell you the love that we have. So I really want to see your faces as I do this. When the day is done, I've run a having fun. My father said this show would never run. Ken must have prayed to the gods above for 50 years of love. Oh, hey now, let's raise our glasses. Here's to the day that we met. Who knew what were the chances seeing you on Zoom every chance that we get? Broadway shows, they run their course, but this chemistry is such a lasting force. So I'll howl at the man in the moon above for 50 years of love. When the day is done and I go to bed, thoughts of this book swirl around in my head. Tell me more, tell me more. I'll be dreaming of our 50 years of love. Oh, hey now, let's raise our glasses. Here's to the day that we met. Who knew what were the chances seeing you on Zoom again? Every chance that we get. Let's celebrate, 'cause tonight has been great, and life is one big mystery. So now it's 51 years, 'cause it's 2023. 51 years of love. 51 years of love. 51 years of love. That's right, folks. 51 friggin' years.
Bravo!
Remember forever, Shabbat, Shabbat.